Hey, what's up guys? Welcome back to the channel. My name is Travis and welcome back to another daily Q&A. Today's question is going to be dealing with algae associated with dealing with dino, or after you have successfully got rid of dino via increasing your nutrients, and you might actually get some algae because of it. So I'm going to go ahead and read the question and then we're going to attempt to answer it. So, alright, so I'm going to put it on the screen, if I can find it. I'm going to put it on the screen. Hi Travis, I have a question. Newer tank, not my first, and I had a battle of dino for because of low nutrients. I started feeding really heavy and blowing off the rocks and dosing hydrogen peroxide. I got the dino under control, but now dealing with some weird turf algae growing. The tank is around 4 months old and SPS dominant. Corals are all growing really well, but I have 0 nitrate and 0 phosphates, which is probably a false reading from the algae. Unfortunately, because the turf algae is extremely hard to remove, I've scraped what I could from the rocks, but there's some hard to reach areas because of the growing SPS. Should I dose nitrate and phosphates for coral health, or continue with the low nutrients and try to beat the algae? Thanks for your help. Okay, so this is actually really common because if you guys are not aware of this, probably 9 out of 10 times if you have dino in your tank, it's because you've had 0 nitrates and 0 phosphates for quite a while. It could either be because your coral's growing and you haven't been dosing it, or you're not feeding enough, or it could be because you already have algae in the tank and that algae is using up the available nitrates and phosphates, and then dino will kick in. So there is such thing as having dino and algae at the same time. It's pretty crappy, but you can deal with it and take care of it. So when it comes to your situation here, man, because you have gotten the majority of it, I would go ahead and just bump up your cleanup crew a little bit and get in there. I've used like needle nose pliers, well, they're kind of like tongs, but I've gotten into clients' tanks and got some hard to reach algae that's underneath the rocks or underneath the coral. But if you could just increase your cleanup crew, I know hermit crab's really big on eating that stuff. That might help take care of it. But I would definitely not be dosing any nitrates and phosphates, because you're really not going to get an accurate reading of what's actually in the tank until the majority of that algae is either gone, or, actually if it's completely gone, because what happens is, like we said before, if that algae is in the tank, it's actively using up the nitrates and phosphates in the water column. And I know I don't have a picture associated with the question, so I can't really tell you if the amount of algae that you have is enough to really justify having those lower nutrients. But it's pretty safe to say if you have algae in the tank, you're getting excess nutrients from somewhere. So I would definitely not dose anything. I would just keep an eye on the coral and definitely work daily to removing that algae from the tank and getting the tank back to stable, and then of course testing from there. When it comes to algae, it's just one of those things that happens when you're trying to fix dino. You're not the first person to send me this question. You probably won't be the last. It's just we're trying to increase our nutrients, and because naturally we're not very patient, and we kind of like dump stuff in. Believe me, I do it all the time. You just dump stuff in the tank to try to get a quick fix. Unfortunately, we do overdose, and then we don't catch it in time, and then the algae will start showing its face, and once algae gets in there, it becomes an issue. So another thing you could do is implement an algae scrubber, a Chaeto reactor, or even have a refugium. That algae alone will help starve out the algae in the main display tank. Of course, run that light while the main display is off, and then even running it a couple hours while the main display is on is a good idea as well, just to kind of get the algae up and moving and growing. Well, not up and moving, but growing before the lights actually go off in the main display. So I would go ahead and implement some algae outside of that, manual removal, and then just keep an eye on your nitrates and phosphates, of course, to make sure your test kits are up to date and you're using a reliable method like HANA or something like that. Personally, that's what I use for nitrates and phosphates now that I moved over to the HANA high range. Which shout out to you guys, everybody who recommended places to get the reagent for the HANA checker. I know I mentioned that in the video before I had an issue, and shout out to Rogue Aquariums for actually sending me like 50 of them. So really appreciate that. So yeah, with that said, hopefully this helps answer your question. But I wouldn't do anything drastic. I wouldn't dose anything. I wouldn't go crazy. It would just keep up with your manual removal, keep an eye on your levels. If you notice that your coral is, I want to add this too, if your coral starts getting really pale, then consider dosing at that point. But I wouldn't go crazy. You said they're growing, they seem to be doing fine, but if you see paleness, that might be an indication that the nutrients are just low in the tank and that algae is just stubborn, okay? You might actually have low nutrients in the tank, and what little bit you do have, that algae is consuming. So you might have to consider dosing at that point, but I would wait until you start seeing a little bit of paleness in the corals. And now now you're gonna look at this tank and be like, holy crap, everything's pale, and then you're gonna freak out and start dosing. Don't do that. Just keep an eye on it, and yeah. So with that said, hopefully that helps, and I'll see you guys later. And remember, if you want to be part of this series, just add your question in the comment section, and I'll get to it. Okay, peace.